So if you haven't heard the news, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 Remastered is basically confirmed. However, like many news stories, this comes with a good side and a bad side. And according to Charlie Intel, and I'm not a Call of Duty news channel by any means, but I'm laying my 2 cents into the ring on this issue. They're not putting a multiplayer in this $25 game that they're selling, which seems ridiculous when you think about it. Multiplayer is one of the largest facets of the community for Call of Duty, and in particular that game particularly had a huge multiplayer fan base. Multiplayer was fairly prolific, especially on YouTube at the time. I wasn't into Call of Duty when that game released. I was more so a Halo fan at the time. But my friends did enjoy that game, and I did play it with them a few times. I wasn't the best Call of Duty player when that game came out, but they were much better than I was at the time, and probably still are now that I think about it, but I have no idea. I don't think they even play COD anymore. But in regards to Modern Warfare 2 campaign and no multiplayer, while a lot of people think that this is a mistake, and I certainly am in that camp that think not releasing the multiplayer is a huge mistake. I think that it's basically pissing on the community and taking any goodwill the company had and obliterating it for no reason. It doesn't make sense, especially given that the last Modern Warfare Remaster had multiplayer. This could easily have it and provide an exciting playing opportunity for the people who didn't play the game when it originally came out to play it on new consoles, which would be pretty good when you think about it. I mean, there's probably a whole not a whole generation, but there's a good portion of the population now that haven't played it who are gamers. When you think about it, that game came out almost 10 years ago, I want to say. It's got to be, what, 2009-ish is when it came out, I want to say. So yeah, it's getting on there. That time has passed. We have progressed. But I'm going to explain in this video also why this happened and sort of how we got to this decision. I wasn't involved, obviously. No shit, Jimbo. But factors probably went in what happened. So what I think happened, basically. So here's my 2 cents. Now, when you look at it, what I think happened is you had some real pencil pusher type at Activision, not really good with ideas, who doesn't understand the community, but had some ideas. And whoever greenlit it with the notion that we're going to play it by the numbers. So what I mean by that is, when you look at the numbers of Call of Duty, everyone knows multiplayer is a huge factor of the community. It's a huge pillar of each game. Well, in this instance, single player is also a huge pillar of the community, and people always forget that. They always overlook that. What I mean by on paper is you have to factor in how many units were sold versus how many units actually went online. And when you look at it, the numbers don't really add up. We don't have access to the numbers, but you could assume the player base was whatever it was at the time, and it was probably less than the total number of units sold. So you take out the max player base numbers of people who are online, and you take the max number of units sold and divide them. And what you're left with after subtracting, whoops, oh, change the math up. Okay, I'm not getting into character for this. Is the remainder of units that haven't gone online that were sold. Thus, units that only played offline, either offline multiplayer or campaign. You factor in trackable achievements based off the Xbox Live 360 and PS3 of all people completing the base campaign mission, no Russian, and some of them, most of them, completing campaign. Historically, the averages have always been around 90% of the units sold always do the first mission of campaign. 90% of total units sold. This is higher than the multiplayer portion of the audience. And then you go on to later missions of the campaign, those numbers obviously go downward. And eventually I think they average out at around 60% for total campaign completion. This might be higher for Modern Warfare 2. I do not know. I'm not going to look this up. But historically, over the last few CODs, probably 3 years ago, around the AW Ghost MW3 sort of cycle, this is what we saw. Now, there has been evidence of another developer in the community, not necessarily affiliated with Call of Duty, but who has connections and said on the record in an interview that the biggest factor of Call of Duty is the single player for, I believe it was Black Ops, when they looked at the total number of units sold versus the total accounts that were online. The total accounts online did not match the total units sold. Thus, the remainder were only playing campaign. And then you look at the achievements, like I said before, factor that in. Everyone plays the first mission. So on paper, what you have is campaign looks like a very easy way to push a game because most people will actually play it. So on paper, instead of this being a bad decision not including multiplayer, this looks like a highly profitable one where they can easily rake in some profit because more people play it than don't. They're looking at the old numbers and how that system worked, but they're not factoring in multiplayer or community feedback. What does this tell me? Well, it must mean that more people played campaign than multiplayer back in the day because that number would justify remaking it. So that's where I'm at. That's not where I'm at personally. I think it's a shitty decision not to make multiplayer again. I played it after the fact, and I thought it was a fairly enjoyable game. The fact that the nuke was in it was pretty iconic. The kill streaks were very great in that game. And really haven't been matched since. Well, no, I can't say that. They've been great in all of the Treyarch games. So I have nothing bad or ill to say about any of the Treyarch games at all. I hold those in highest regard in terms of Call of Duty-ness. And their kill streaks are always fantastic. The rest of them, not so much. But Modern Warfare 2 had great ones. Even Modern Warfare 3 was pretty good, too. After that, it's basically, you know how it went. This hopefully helps you understand some of the rationale behind them only releasing a single-player campaign as opposed to a multiplayer and single-player. It seems like a very quick investment to get some of that Call of Duty money while putting in not as much effort necessarily to remaster a multiplayer. Though, when you think about it, maybe they can release a multiplayer later on down the line, though I think a staggered release would be fairly stupid. But when you look at it, and what always works with Call of Duty is the asset development and creation of a remaster, right? So you're basically having a lot of assets from single player end up getting reused in multiplayer. So it doesn't make sense not to put a multiplayer in, especially when the community is very vocal about multiplayer being a huge thing. There are multiplayer is a huge thing. That's not to say that's not to negate it as something very small. It's a massive thing in its own right. It's probably one of the biggest things about Call of Duty, even though we said campaign is, but campaign is on paper when you factor in all of the issues about sales and again achievements and historical averages for them. Multiplayer is huge, almost as big as that. It's very huge. Them not doing it seems ridiculous too when I'm talking about now asset creation, because most of the assets for a remaster will be coming out of your single player experience. Things like player models, you basically get most of it done for single player, and then bring them over for multiplayer and just adjust the uniforms as needed. Weapons, all of that. If you're remaking it for single player, there's no reason you can't bring it over to multiplayer. Like it when you look at it in terms of work, it doesn't make sense. Anyway, this is just an explanation. Again, I'm not a news channel. I'm not going to try to be a Call of Duty news channel, but just putting in another perspective on the sort of backlash that's coming out of maybe. So maybe you're like, okay, I see why they did it. I don't like why they did it, It's not a good idea, and I think it's stupid. I don't know if this helped the dialogue about it at all, but maybe it gave you some insight if you watch this video. Well, that's good for you. I'm going to come out with another Easter egg or something later tonight, maybe. Hopefully another Fortnite video. We have quite a bit of videos coming out soon, so you want to stay tuned.